All right, so we're live, and I want to thank the lovely Janelle for being on with me today. This is the first time speaking to you, right?
I think so.
It's the first time speaking to you. That's right. So we are on today, and we're going to talk about genealogy in our communities. We're going to talk about the need for family history to understand who our people are and why, and the techniques that you use. So without further ado, let me just ask Janelle a question. How did you first get into the tracing your family tree and whatnot?
I think I was in college at the time. We actually had to do a family tree. And then that's when I realized I knew nothing much at all about it. It was a Black history course actually, and the professor had us do it. So I literally had to make stuff up to do like three generations. I made stuff up. There was no way I could get the information, so and no one knew the information, so I just made stuff up to get that grade. But after that, like something in me said I had to know more, know more of my history, know more of my family, stuff like that. That's what started it for me.
Was it something where the reason why you didn't know is because maybe was it just that something that wasn't talked about or it wasn't really important to know these things before? Or,
I mean, you grow up and people always say, oh, this person is your family and that person is your family, but you don't really know how.
mhm.
So, like, I didn't know what the connections were. And then when I started doing that project, I realized I didn't even know some of the names of my closest ancestors, like my great grandparents. Like, I didn't know I didn't know most of their names. So, at that point, that's when I really started trying to figure out what was what.
Well, that's interesting you say that because I remember being in the barber shop recently and somebody asked me a question about, why I study this sort of stuff, and I tell them, um, well, I asked the young fellow, how far back can you go if I ask you to go back in
Hmm.
your family? And it was the same thing. He only knew he knew one grandparent, I think.
Hmm.
He didn't know his great grandparents.
Yeah.
And that's very strange because people at least knew your great grandparent because I guess how our communities were set up, like it was more like extended families living on the same area. But for
Yeah.
him, it was different because people ended up leaving, so he didn't know a lot of people and whatnot, and people died off, and
Hmm.
nobody bothered to tell him stuff. And then this conversation started going in the barbershop, and you realize that a lot of our people really don't know the family at all. They don't,
Yeah.
they can't go back at all.
Hmm.
So hearing you say that you had to make stuff up, was that after you actually started though? What were some of
Uh-huh.
the what were some of the difficulties you might have encountered?
I mean, I try to reach out to my immediate family, my mother, my father, aunts. Like I have an aunt who knows a lot of the history,
Mhm.
but she herself didn't know some of the names of like her. She didn't know her grandparents' name, her paternal grandparents' name, and so like even though we talked about different lines, she also didn't have the information, and she was the one. My aunt was the one who would have been a source of a particular line for me, and but in doing this, I realized like after I started it up again, I realized one of the reasons why some of my lines were so um limited in terms of knowledge is because my grandmother's mother, she died when she was young, like 2.5. My grandfather's mother, I just found out maybe a month ago that his mom died when he was about 6. So those two lines, that's probably a reason why information and knowledge was so limited because nobody passed it on to them, and in turn they couldn't pass it on to us.
That's unfortunate. Normally, something like that where you find people dying, I guess you can't help that. But is it that even the people were your elders, who are your elders now and surviving now,
Mm.
did did they have a knowledge of the history past, or did they try? Did they try? Anything like
Hmm. I think they always had, they always wanted to know, but I don't know if they had the tools and the resources to find out more. Um, I was just lucky in starting it back up. I was just lucky to find out some of the information that I did. But I think even without even with like the information that I can find now here in New York, a lot of people in St. Kitts might not even have access to that information. So it was just luck on my part.
You're using resources from where exactly in New York? Because the stuff you're showing me, I know
Hmm.
I don't have that stuff here.
Yeah.
Where are you finding this information in New York?
It's from the Family History Center. It's run actually by the Mormon Church, but
Mm.
you can go there. It's free. You don't have to be affiliated with the Mormon. You can just go, and you can go. You can access their records. They don't try to get you to sign up with their church or anything, but it's with the Mormon Church, or what they call the Latter-day Saints. So they pretty much have family history centers in most major cities. Um, so people can just go and find out that information. They have to literally they have to go to a physical center though to access those images.
Do you find tracing your family history to be an important fulfilling project? I mean, what has it done for you personally?
I mean, it's definitely it's very addictive. I can tell you that much. Once you start, it's you just want to know more to fill in those puzzle pieces. And I think it is important to know who you are, where you come from. You know, I mean, like for me, some of the lines that I just recently found out about, like I had no knowledge of that before. So like I just want to find out. Right now, on one of my lines, I'm back to my third great grandparent. So for me, like getting that much information on a line that I knew nothing about a year ago is very, very, very fulfilling.
Does it
So
give
in terms
you?
of you, how far back have you gone on any of your lines?
I've gone far back as a third great grandparent, I think, on either side, and
Okay.
it's rough. It's rough in terms of going further back because a lot of our people, I guess, the births were not seen as important. So you find birth records a bit sketchy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and people just didn't consider themselves to be important enough to pass down certain history. Like when I was speaking to my grandmother, I think I told you already, and she was confused, like why is that important?
Yeah.
Things I'm telling her, asking her, she had no knowledge about, or it would bring back memories for her. And I guess for our people, because we don't feel like we come from much, we don't feel like maybe it's important to know things about the past. You know, a lot of our elders were not taught to appreciate themselves as much as the material thing. So for me, knowing who I am, because I guess when you have a situation where you look like how I look,
Mm-hmm.
light skin, people have all these stories and all these things about who your family was and whatnot, and you're curious, but for some reason nobody wants to talk about certain things
Yeah.
until you go back and you realize it's really nothing to be put off by, but some people just don't want to talk about the family,
Mm-hmm.
especially people when you come from, so I think when you come from poverty, you usually don't think of yourself as worth talking about, you know, and that is a very hard thing, especially when you speak to your elders and you realize that's the situation. They really didn't think of themselves much as, as important. And some people might have had traumatic experiences when they were younger. or left certain things when they were younger, and they don't want to even speak about their family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was rough for me going back even that far. I remember my mother was telling me the reason what the only reason they knew how old my maternal great grandmother was that she was sick, and my mother had to go find her birth certificate, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
by chance they found it, and that's how she knew how old she was. She had no real idea how old she was, none. And that's a story that a lot of us have.
Yeah.
You know, that they just didn't see it as important enough to even
To
record how
sh-
old they were.
yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, so that's some of the difficulties in terms of the importance for the younger people though. Is this something that you might be involving your kids in, or anybody younger than you?
Um, well, my daughter, she's in 10th grade, and they're
Hmm.
actually going to be doing a DNA project in May.
Hmm.
They're going to, after they complete a particular exam, they're going to start on their DNA, and they're going to have genealogists coming into the school to help them with that.
Hmm.
So she's not as interested yet, but hopefully once that project starts, she'll be she'll get into it more.
Do you feel in terms of from an African perspective, in terms of our people though,
Mm-hmm.
how important is it? I know you said it's important, but explain to me exactly, for our people specifically,
Mommy.
why would you encourage a young man or young woman to go back and trace as far back as you could trace it?
Are you talking genealogy, family, like tree now, or specifically DNA?
Either.
Either. Well, for in terms of family tree, there's not much of a paper trail after you get to a certain point. So it's hard for somebody to trace back way back to see where they came from. But to me, that's where DNA comes into play
Mhm.
because the DNA, like with Ancestry or with 23andMe, it gives a very good estimate as to a very good ethnicity estimate in terms of where your ancestors came from hundreds and thousands of years ago. So, in terms of DNA testing, I think that's important if you want to have an idea, because we were uprooted basically from Africa, and it gives you an idea of exactly, it pinpoints exactly where in Africa your folks might have been from. So that part I think is important. A lot of people want to know that part. We all hear Africa, but Africa is a vast place, you
Right.
know. So like we're in Africa. So that part I think is important in trying to determine where you're from. Paper trail, I think at some point, unless you're extremely lucky, you're gonna run out of in getting a paper trail. You're
Right.
just gonna run out of luck
Right.
unless you,
Right.
yeah.
We have a lot of people though who, even with the DNA, and I explained it because me and you have put up our DNA results publicly on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that more people use the opportunity to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
you find people, our people especially, for some reason, we like to hang on to the more minute parts of our DNA. What do you think that is? Like, we can't wait to find out about the Native American. We can't wait to find out about the Portuguese in us, the Indian in us. What do you think that is?
This is it might be a little bit controversial. Um, hold on one second. I think it's a matter of I don't want to say uh I don't
Let's
want to
come
say
with it.
lack of love,
Yeah.
but it's like love of other. It's like a love of other more. So the fact that when people find out that they have something else in them, it's like they tend to glorify and I guess glorify that 5%
Right,
that they have, that 10% that they have, versus the 80% of something else that they have.
right, right. But that's the issue, right? Because for me, I had an idea exactly what it might be. I knew it would be something Great Britain. I knew that,
Yeah.
right? But then it's 78% African, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anytime I put up these results, it's like, oh, you have this amount of European. I'm like, yeah, right?
Yeah.
But it's 78% African, right? So
I have 87, by the way.
there you go, 87. So you're even closer to home than me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, for some reason, our people really, we are attracted to something else, always. That catches the eye first.
But don't you think that's like a product of colonization, though?
But of course, we have an issue where we just love to know that we're something else because it makes us feel special. I have a young lady who is a friend of mine, and she will tell you, oh, my great grandmother is from someplace in India or something, something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how you know that? And she will be like, oh, my father's, and she started talking about her hair and whatnot, and what somebody told her. I was like, so you never checked? Like, no, but my great grandmother was from India. So I was like, where the rest of you is from? And that's not important, right?
Yeah.
That's not important. You know, I just find that our people don't have the love, or it's been driven out of us, the love for Africa. We don't like to know that we are. We seem to have an aversion to where we're from. It's I was speaking to somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact, about the mind triggers that we
Mm-hmm.
have when you start showing love for self. And I went through all of these things. You don't want to, you firstly don't want to tie yourself to Africa. Anything about Africa is bad. The continent is bad. The people are bad. The spiritual systems are bad. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to tie yourself to Africa. So you look for everything else, right? Because in my family, the grand story was, oh, because my grandfather told me, and this is exact words, oh, my father was a Scotsman, and he gloried in that,
Yeah.
right? But his mother was a straight up black woman,
Mm-hmm.
but he never spoke about her, right? So this is
I mean,
like,
but I understand what you're saying, but I can't really blame our people either, because it's just how the society was, and to a certain extent still is. I mean,
sure,
there's a lot of colorism, I think, that exists in St. Kitts and Nevis. Yeah. I mean, your social standing back in the day was pretty much based on how dark or how light you were.
right?
So, I mean, and growing up, anything that was light or anything with a certain type of hair texture, was revered, and anything
Mhm.
that was not was treated in the opposite manner. So you can't really blame our people for how they feel about it.
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm.
that's just a remnant of colonialism. So
Sure,
it's up to us to like kind of
sure,
change that now.
sure. But that is why I said there's certain mind triggers. It's
Yeah.
like once you start, it's like this colonialism left us with certain things in our head,
Hmm.
ingrained in ourselves. That, as we spoke about, anything lighter is somehow better.
Yeah.
And that's just inside of us. We make jokes about it, and it's just common talk around places, and we make certain comments about people.
All the
Say
time.
things, say things like, nice here and bad here,
Hmm.
the good here, which I had to put somebody in the place for that because one of my sons has a bit of a curlier texture than the other one. And he's like, oh, so he got good here. I was like, so you say my other son has bad here? But
Yeah.
these are the things we say offhandedly.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize what we're doing to ourselves. We don't realize what we're doing to our children.
Yeah.
In terms of tracing DNA, though, or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, family tree, did you
Uh-huh.
find anything in yours that was a bit surprising, a bit off?
In terms of what? What do you mean?
Like you said, you found like the other day. I realized you were talking about a Mifflin last name.
Yeah.
Did this tree take you off into places that you really didn't expect at all?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I never even heard that surname. That's how
Really?
surprising it was for me. I was like, Mifflin? I've
Right.
never, ever in my life heard that surname. So to be even um affiliated with that was very surprising for me. Um, and I mean, I don't know where that surname came from,
Hmm.
but from based on what I'm seeing on the birth records that I saw, more than likely they were either white folks or colored folks.
Mhm.
But so, uh, so,
what?
so I think, but that gave me a little bit of I at least know that at whatever percentage European or whatever is
It
in
was
me,
probably
I
that.
at least know where that came from and that it wasn't more than likely wasn't a product of something that I don't even want to think about, if you know what I'm talking about.
No, I hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, here,
You know,
here,
'cause most
here.
most people when they're mixed, a lot of it comes from that,
Right.
comes from that rape and stuff like that. But
Sure.
so at least for me, I was like, oh, okay, it's there, but at least it's not because of that.
Sure. 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 There's a story in our family about my great grandmother who, well, maternal great grandmother, and she had said she will not have a kid with a black man.
Mm,
Right? She was extremely dark,
yeah,
extremely dark. But again, that's the mind conditioning because you wanted your kids to be lighter
mm-hmm,
because society might accept them more.
yeah,
So a lot of so sometimes it probably was not a physical sort of violent rape. But sometimes our people's minds were so gone
yeah,
that mentally we started violating ourselves. But that was something that again was cultured into us from because she was born in 18 something. I
mm-hmm,
think I think she was born must be just about 60 years after final emancipation. So
okay,
her grandparent might have been her grandparent or maybe father self
mm-hmm,
might have been enslaved or at least born at that time. Well, yeah, of course, born a slave maybe. And so she would have been born essentially in a slave society, which St. Kitts and Nevis was even after emancipation was still a slave society essentially.
yeah,
So that mentality was in her.
I need another one.
Right? So
mm-hmm.
so I see a little occupied there.
I'm trying to stay
Yeah,
focused.
yeah, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. We're gonna wrap up just now. We're not gonna keep it too long, all right? Because just some questions I wanted to ask you. Um, tracing your family tree. What's the first step? Somebody who is just starting out, they don't know what to do, they're a bit nervous, a bit
Mm-hmm.
apprehensive. What's the first step?
I mean, you just write down what you know. Put yourself down on that tree. Your parents. I mean, most people would know their parents unless they're adopted. And just start with that. After that, try to talk to anyone talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, and try to get that information so you could slot it in your tree as well. And if you could have the paper trail to go with it, I mean, try to attach those as well. In terms of family tree sites, I would personally I like Ancestry. I just like the format of it. So that's one that I would recommend. Just go there and put down. start with your name, your birthday. Start with your parents, your grandparents, and then go on from there. It's not easy, but it's going to definitely take a lot of time. But just that small, and then grow.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna keep it much longer. I know you're busy right now. You're occupied. So hopefully we can do it again on a different topic. All right. So I want to thank you, Janelle, for some time for today. And we'll talk another time. All right.
All right, thank you so much.
All right. Bye bye.